It's time for The Verdict. The Verdict is a lively discussion of current events and legal issues pertinent to Oklahomans. The Verdict is hosted by Kent Myers and Mick Cornett. It's time for The Verdict.
And welcome once again to The Verdict. Good morning. I'm Mick Cornett. Kent Myers is one of Oklahoma's top legal experts and serves as our co-host. And Kent, today, a very special guest.
We're welcoming back Joe Castiglione, the athletic director at the University of Oklahoma, actually for the first of two shows. They won't be shown consecutively, but we'll have Joe on this week and then a week after next. We're going to be talking about what's going on in intercollegiate athletics, not only simply at the University of Oklahoma, but also generally across the nation. We'll be talking about a little bit about the OU-Texas game and the BCS and some things that are troublesome and rewarding for athletic departments and Joe in particular.
Look forward to it. Joe Castiglione, today on The Verdict, coming up next.
St. Gregory's University has been changing the lives of people like me for 125 years. Affordable private Catholic education, balanced with dedication to community and service, makes St. Gregory special. We're extremely proud of our students' outstanding academic achievements and our nationally ranked athletic teams. It's when you help a student build a future of balance, integrity, and service that you change a life forever. St. Gregory's, a community for life.
There are a lot of logical reasons to buy an FX Cruiser High Output from Yamaha. A clean-burning 4-stroke high-output engine, the best power-to-weight ratio in its class. Yamaha's world-renowned reliability, and countless others. But in case you need a few more reasons, just take a look at your family's faces. The new FX Cruiser High Output, only from Yamaha.
That's refined Yamaha 1110 South 3rd. We're in the finest yellow pages.
All children deserve a life of hope and love, but sometimes they experience a life of pain, neglect, and abuse.
When that happens, each child deserves all the quality assistance and representation that can be offered in our legal system. For more information, call 23-CHILD.
Oklahoma Lawyers for Children, helping to bring hope and love back to the lives of abused children.
Own a timeshare? Sell it for cash. Own a campground membership? Sell it for cash. Now's the perfect time to buy, sell, or rent your timeshare for cash. Call right now for your free information kit to buy, sell, or rent your timeshare or campground membership for cash. Be one of the next 200 callers for your free information kit, and we'll include 10 secrets to buy or sell your timeshare by vacations only. Buy, sell, or rent your timeshare for cash. Call now. Don't wait to pay another maintenance fee or tax bill. It's a free call, so call now.
And welcome back to The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers, and Kent's going to introduce our guest.
We are most pleased to once again welcome Joe Castiglione to the show. Joe is a frequent visitor. We'd love to have him back all the time, by the way. The more we can get you, the better. He is the 11th athletic director at the University of Oklahoma, came to Oklahoma through a progression from Rice to Missouri, and ultimately to the University of Oklahoma. Has been very successful there. He has many accomplishments that his department has been responsible for on the athletic field. He's going to talk to us today about some rather unique situations in running an athletic department. What kind of problems do you deal with? We're going to have this show with him, and then we're going to have another show in a couple of weeks with him. And Joe, thanks for coming back again. We're really pleased to see you again.
My pleasure, Kent. It's good to be with Mick.
As we're taping the show, football team undefeated and having good success. The Texas game, still a lot of controversy from some circles about whether or not the game should be played in Dallas and where that game should be played. What's your take?
Well, my take is that the vast majority of the Oklahoma fans prefer the game in Dallas in that type of an atmosphere. At least the people I have heard from, they have been vehemently supporting keeping it there. But there is a group of people that feel like perhaps it's time to rotate the game between two campuses. Both universities have stadiums that seat more than the Cotton Bowl currently. Obviously, both stadiums have been renovated and are in better condition than the Cotton Bowl. But there are consequences to that decision too. Ultimately, it'll be decided by the president and the board of regents, and I imagine the same thing at the University of Texas. We have a 4-year contract remaining, so I don't expect any kind of change in the foreseeable future. There's a new stadium referendum sitting out there in the greater Dallas area, not necessarily the city of Dallas. So those kinds of dynamics are all at work, raises that type of question naturally. People want to know, and all I can tell them is that we have a contract in place, and we continue to honor it.
It seems to me there's a recruiting advantage to playing a game in Dallas. There is not a Division I football powerhouse in the Dallas area, yet there's a tremendous amount of recruits. It seems to be an advantage for Texas and Oklahoma to be able to promise those recruits, we're going to play one game in your hometown for your entire length of your career at your school.
Very much so. And it's a city that's virtually equidistant from the two campuses, and becomes a battleground, if you will, for recruiting. I have also known it's become an important area for recruiting students to the University of Oklahoma, and not necessarily to play on any one of our athletic teams. So it's an important event for us. Obviously gets an enormous amount of media exposure in that area. It's like a bowl game in the middle of the season, really quite unique in college athletics.
You were mentioning the Cotton Bowl and the facilities and perhaps a new stadium in Dallas in the future, perhaps. Let's talk a little bit about what's going on down in Norman on football facilities. We've seen some in the information in the press about the Switzer Center being redone. Tell our viewers what's going on in football-related facilities at Norman.
Well, as most people know, we just finished a $70 million renovation of the stadium. Actually opened up the majority of it last season, and then of course we've had a few more projects taking place between the end of last season and this season. But there are some that we've scheduled to complete between each of the next 2 to 3 seasons, just because they weren't as high of a priority as the expansion, the other kinds of the major renovation we did on the stadium. So people will see some continued change in the stadium itself. The other aspect, we have certain parts of our facilities plan, if you will, that relate to football that are going to continue to get some type of attention. We have some turf that has to be replaced. We have fields that need to be constantly maintained. You know, we opened up an indoor practice facility which is being used far more than probably anybody could have imagined. Not that the weather has been all that different, but it's really provided a great resource for football. And as you mentioned, we recently renovated and opened to the public our Legends Lobby, which displays all the heritage, both from a team accomplishment standpoint as well as recognizing those very talented players over the years that have won Heisman trophies, to National Hall of Fame honors, to other kinds of national award winners and academic All-Americans, etc. That is very, very special, and that's located at the Switzer Center, and we have that open now to the public 2 days a week.
Are you getting much traffic through there?
Yeah, absolutely. It is. I had a guy come up to me after his visit through there, and he said, "I just want to thank you for putting such a wonderful display together. I didn't know whether to laugh, cry, or pray." I said, well, you know what? Each one of those emotions come into play at some point in a sports season, so don't lose any of that.
Hey, following up on your facilities, it seems to me that there's a trend in the outdoor sports facilities. Professionally, they seem to be getting smaller, trying to create that atmosphere of a tougher ticket. But in college sports, I don't see them getting smaller. You look at what Tennessee's done, and certainly Michigan plays at a large facility, and of course the Rose Bowl and the Coliseum are large in the LA area. If you could snap your fingers and have a certain amount of people that could come into Memorial Stadium, is the number you have now what you want, or could you see a day when you'd approach 6 figures?
The number we have right now is exactly what we want, primarily because we've understood the population and the rate of expansion in the population of the state of Oklahoma.
And that number is, just remind our viewers what that number is.
So about 3.2 million people.
No, I mean in your stadium.
Oh, we have 82,000 some reserve seats, and we can accommodate right around 84,500. Okay. We've broken the record twice already this season. The size of the stadium, I think, needs to be kept, somewhat in relation to the population. We're one of the few states with a population of that size that have 2 other Division I programs in football. And so we know there are some games during the course of a year that probably could sell another 5, 10,000, 15,000 seats. But we have to keep that supply and demand factor squarely in our sights. We want to make sure that the demand is always higher than the number of tickets we have available. The difference between college and athletics, as I see it, is the cost of the ticket itself. While we all know the cost of tickets have gone up for college sports, the pro leagues are driving their ticket prices higher and higher because of the revenue that they can get. And that's why higher end tickets, club seats and suites, have become more the norm than the actual individual seats in the stadium. We have both, but we want to be able to offer our tickets to a wide spectrum of fans, not pricing anybody out, if you will. And to the extent that we can continue to grow, we will. Maybe 5 years down the road, we'll look at another expansion. We'll wait and see.
For the past several years, we've been determining our national college football champion with a system called the BCS, the Bowl Championship Series. Your take on the BCS, its evolution, where it is today, and where you think it's headed?
We always said from the day of its inception that it was the best system that could be developed, but it is not perfect. So when you start with that premise, you always know that there is a flaw or two or three in the midst of the system. Over the last 4 years, there have been a variety of different changes, all of which have been pretty good. Even this current year, there are some changes made because of the debate that ensued last season when the number one team in the opinion polls did not play in that so-called BCS championship. So there have been some changes in the poll formula and how the BCS poll is structured. That BCS poll has just come out when this show is airing, and we'll see how some of that change in formula affects the standings. But there's also a number of different things going on related to the BCS that I think are creating some significant challenges. The people may remember that there have been some serious conversations going on certain campuses, and then it drew in local legislators and people in Washington arguing about whether or not schools have guaranteed access and trying to determine whether they should have the guaranteed access instead of the just access by playing well enough, in a course of a college football season, which they have right now. Yep. We have a number of teams climbing up the polls that very well might find their way into a BCS game this year.
So you have 2 at-large positions.
Yes. Yeah. And so going forward, it's creating some significant challenges. We'll wait and see. The market has to sort of bear this out. And it's being tested right now with the television networks because they basically own, the games under this BCS structure. We'll have to see. I think there's some serious challenges ahead for this BCS structure. And the chance of going back to something like we had before, or at least a little bit similar to that, I think is probably more possible now than it's been in the last few years.
By that, you're talking about conference tie-ups with particular bowl games.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
And a playoff system?
Playoff cannot be on the radar screen for anyone at this time, as so say the presidents. So it really isn't part of anyone's discussion. I maintain that perhaps we're seeing a college playoff develop before our very eyes, even if we don't call it that. And that's the way the regular season plays out. Every game, every week is so important. Look at the pundits out there and how they hang their sort of hopes and dreams on certain teams, and they want to know how they're going to finish out the season. Some like to write the last chapter of the book before they've ever read the first 6 or 8, and the way it goes.
Let me jump and get us to a break. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers. Our guest this week is Joe Castiglione, the athletic director at the University of Oklahoma. We'll be right back.
We live in a world that knows so little about the Bible, and yet the Bible is the only book from heaven. The Bible is also the only book that can lead us to heaven. I'm Timothy Sparks. And I am Ben Bailey. We hope you'll join us as we study God's holy Word.
I will hold up my American Express Tax and Business Services. We're accountants. We do taxes, business valuations, estate planning, and consulting. And we're right here in Oklahoma, working with the owners of small and medium-sized businesses. Steve Wilsey and Stuart Meyer have the resources and the experience. American Express Tax and Business Services. In Oklahoma City, the phone number is 405-843-5311.
If you've ever wanted a career in criminal justice, now is the time. The need is great and the demand is high for those who have what it takes.
If this is what you're looking for, the Paralegal Institute's new criminal justice program could be right for you. You can study at home at your own pace as you prepare for entry or advancement in this vital field.
This accredited professional development program was designed by criminal justice professionals to give you the foundation from which to build your career in law enforcement, courts, corrections, private and industrial security, or investigations.
If you're ready to change your life and start a career where you can make a difference, call the Paralegal Institute now for our free information packet.
Phone 1-800-513-4488. If a criminal justice career interests you, don't delay. Call the Paralegal Institute now at 1-800-513-4488. The right choice in paralegal education. The Paralegal Institute. Call 1-800-513-4488.
Welcome back to The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers. Our guest this week is Joe Castiglione, the athletic director at the University of Oklahoma.
Joe, we've mentioned the NCAA a couple of times already, but let's talk about that a little more in detail. I know you've got an awesome responsibility to make sure that the athletic teams and coaches and personnel comply with NCAA rules all the time, and some of them are pretty well known and some of them are pretty obscure. What do you do as an athletic director to do your best to try to make sure that NCAA regulations are followed?
We're probably no different than many other businesses out there around the country. We're regulated. I may not call it that way in our business, but we have institutional policies and procedures. We have conference policies and procedures, and as you mentioned, NCAA. Currently, we have 4 full-time staff members that focus on just NCAA or conference policies, and that could relate to eligibility, could relate to academic status, could relate to recruiting practices, it could relate to rules that govern our competition. And we have 3 to 4 others that closely monitor what's going on. But really, when it comes down to it, everyone that is employed by our department has to monitor a variety of rules and make sure that they are followed. And the book is 700 pages, and it is a very complex book to read. And of course, it's written to address all levels of NCAA's Division I, II, and III. But there are a number of different rules that apply only to certain sports. Some apply across all of the sports, and some differ between Divisions II and III. And so it's vitally important for us to be aggressive at monitoring and, quite honestly, even educating, reminding people there's a recruiting period. There are certain kinds of rules that are coming into effect at a certain point in time, and we do that kind of proactively to hopefully prevent problems.
It's my perception that the NCAA's image has changed through the years. It's, again, my perception, say 30 years ago, if you discovered that your school had committed a violation, you probably wouldn't have called the NCAA and turned yourself in. Whereas these days, I think that's encouraged. Am I right there?
A totally different culture than before. Actually, if a school isn't reporting NCAA violations, it raises a red flag. There are so many different rules that can be violated, even inadvertently. Some people don't even realize they're violating a rule. We're not talking about extra benefit rules that people out trying to give our student athletes something. Not the obvious ones. There's some very subtle type of rules. But we report everything. If it's the smallest to whatever it is, we report everything. So it's not a question of a school being looked upon or frowned upon because of reporting. Actually, that is the culture that the NCAA wants. And the NCAA is really the membership. This is what our CEOs want. This is what all of us in the NCAA want, is that there is an openness. So we are trying to check ourselves. And, we're trying to create that kind of a spirit inside our department with our student athletes on campus, and quite candidly in the community. We have high-profile people, and maybe they want to do something out of the kindness of their heart, want to involve a student athlete in a different way, but it's not allowable. We've got to make sure we keep people educated as best we can.
What's the burden from your department on recruiting? Do you get involved in that at all?
We get involved in a variety of different ways. As athletic director, I meet with a great number, not all, but a great number of the prospective student athletes and their families that are coming on campus. It's just a way to try to promote that this campus community is significantly involved in the success of that sport. From an NCAA standpoint, we have a variety of different rules that relate to student recruitment. And in the last year, with a lot of the media attention that has been created at certain programs, most notably one in our own conference, there's a greater attention to the recruitment before the student athlete signs with an institution. We've basically redone a lot of our rules. Not that we had archaic rules, but just today's world, they're asking for more scrutiny. They want more checks and balances, and that's okay. We're even putting our prospective student athletes through a background check, so there's not a surprise when a student athlete comes on campus and may have some kind of situation in their background that we needed to know about. By and large, that rarely happens, but occasionally, you'll find something, and you got to be able to act accordingly.
Well, how much of a budget item is recruiting for your department? I mean, do you spend a lot of money on recruiting? Bringing athletes in is at your expense.
Yeah, the budgets vary from one sport to the other, primarily because of the number of student athletes that may be competing in that sport and or scholarships that might be available. Football being the sport that has the most number of student athletes on scholarship, they recruit more student athletes every year. So, obviously the budget will be higher. But the budgets relate to the travel of the coach to go out and, evaluate student athletes, to bring prospective student athletes in for an official visit, to handling the ancillary expenses in recruiting. And then, of course, we do a lot of things that don't really show up in a recruiting budget, but that we're trying to create this kind of program that people perceive as quality, classy, and in position to pursue championships. So when you talked about facilities earlier, there is sort of an angle toward recruiting, in a sense that you want to appeal to student athletes in a way that they have every resource available to them. They're gifted, they're talented, they've got academic dreams and athletic dreams. This is the place, the University of Oklahoma, where you can come and fulfill all of your dreams and make them become reality. And so that's not really in the recruiting budget, but it does directly affect recruiting.
You're a professional in the intercollegiate athletic world. It's your career. What's your take on the George Cross quote from many, many years ago that he hopes to have a university that the football team can be proud of? Just how important is intercollegiate athletic success and the way a program is run? How important is that to the university itself?
I realize that there are varying opinions on this, and I'm biased, as you mentioned, being in athletics, but I think it's critically important to the sense of community that we build on a campus. It's part of the quality of life. And here at the University of Oklahoma, intercollegiate athletics is directly related to the mission of this university. It's integrated, and I think that's vitally important. But for those people that don't believe that it's important, try taking away intercollegiate athletics from the University of Oklahoma. It still could be a great university. Certainly athletics is not any more important than, in fact, it's not even close to the importance of the academic mission, but it fits. It enhances, it creates, a feeling. It brings people back that probably, can focus on some other initiatives on campus. So I just say take it away from certain universities and you can kind of imagine the effect without it.
Mm-hmm. And in your case, it's kind of become the fabric of the entire state.
No question.
Because you share the name with the state, there's certainly a name identity, and Oklahoma as a state is known for football, and largely because of its association with your winning programs through the years.
Well said.
Well, we're out of time, and I'm glad you're coming back for a show in a couple of weeks, and we'll talk more with Joe Castiglione then. Kent and I'll be back with a final word after this.
Bringing out the best in each student. That is the simple goal and tradition of Heritage Hall. The focus on the individual shapes the educational experience at Heritage Hall. Each student benefits from small classes, able, dedicated teachers, a solid academic curriculum, and exceptional co-curricular programs of athletics, arts, community service, and other activities, parental involvement, personalized counseling, and the development of responsibility, integrity, and love of learning. If you want education taught with pride, then you want Heritage Hall.
There are a lot of logical reasons to buy an FX Cruiser high output from Yamaha. A clean-burning 4-stroke high-output engine, the best power-to-weight ratio in its class. Yamaha's world-renowned reliability, and countless others. But in case you need a few more reasons, just take a look at your family's faces. The new FX Cruiser high output, only from Yamaha.
That's very fine Yamaha 1110 South 3rd. We're in the finest yellow pages.
Thanks, Oklahoma, for joining KSBI at the 2004 Affair of the Heart. Thousands of Oklahomans joined us at the Oklahoma State Fairgrounds for fun and fellowship. We love being part of our community. KSBI TV, family television for Oklahoma.
If your life has been devastated by mesothelioma, the rare form of cancer caused by exposure to asbestos, you have legal rights that could result in a cash settlement worth hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars. And it won't cost you a cent unless you win. Our affiliated law offices have won millions of dollars for victims of mesothelioma and their families. We know how to make companies pay for their mistakes. It's a fact. Companies whose employees have developed mesothelioma because of exposure to asbestos have paid hundreds of millions of dollars to the victims and the families of deceased victims. Know your rights. Get the money and the justice you deserve. And remember, you don't pay us anything until we get money for you. Get treated with respect and dignity. Get what the law entitles you to. Get the money and the justice you deserve.
Call 800-496-5437. That's 800-496-5437.
Welcome back to The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers here to wrap up another show.
Well, we're always glad to have Joe Castiglione join us. He has a lot of interesting things to share with us, and we have another show in 2 weeks with Joe. He'll come back, and we're going to explore some new subjects that we haven't talked about, but it's always good that he'll take time to drive up here and tape our show with us, and we appreciate it very much and wish Joe and his department a lot of good luck.
And again, thanks to Joe Castiglione for being on this edition of The Verdict. For Kent Myers, I'm Mick Cornett. We'll see you next time, next week, right here on The Verdict.